Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Cinefile, the podcast celebrating cinema one film at a time. Each week, my co-host Jake Biller and I break down a film, discussing anything from mise en scène to scenes you missed. Today is our first of our Christmas classic series, and we're going to talk about if you really can shoot your eye out, because it didn't really look like he shot his eye out. But regardless, we're talking A Christmas Story from 1983. This was my pick this week, and to kick it off, I thought we would go with my dad's favorite Christmas movie. This is going to be, he would have been 60 years old on the 27th. And ironically, we're filming this on the 27th, but of November. So in about a month, he would have been 60. And this is also if it's 1983, it's the 40th anniversary.
Yeah.
So I thought both of those put together, we're gonna talk Ralphie and all the shenanigans and hijinks. Jake, had you seen this movie before?
Oh yes. Oh yes. This is also one of my dad's favorite Christmas movies. My dad doesn't watch many Christmas movies, but this and Christmas Vacation he will watch. And yes, so I've seen this many a time. Anyone who has turned on, I believe it's TBS on Christmas Day for the last I don't know how many years. They play this
40 years now.
They play this for 24 hours. Which is wild that they're just yeah, we're just gonna run the same movie. But it's endearing. It's a classic. It is. And so yeah, many times I'd seen this. It's funny, it's enjoyable. To your point about shooting his eye out, I mean, he breaks his glasses, so
yeah, but he steps on his glasses.
Oh well.
So I guess shooting your eye out would be quite literally shooting your eye out because you stepped on it.
Tomato potato,
Yeah, tomato potato.
But no, this movie is funny. I thought it was just as funny this time. I think it's very endearing. I think that really is what kind of jumped out at me in that it's very relatable, even though this is a movie supposed to be set in the 40s. There's a lot of relatability to it, and I think that's why it's so endearing. And it's become a Christmas staple for a lot of people.
Oh, I 100% agree. I think when you are talking about Christmas films, there are two different types of Christmas film. There's the idealistic kind of Christmas film, the what you expect to see in like a Hallmark movie, right? We have all the Hallmark Christmas movies. And so it's the perfect snow, right? It's the perfect Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, all these. It's perfect. It's idealized, and then you have the others that are purposely not that.
Yeah,
and they are relatable because life isn't like that.
right.
I think that's one of the reasons why, and I might get hate for this, but I'm not a huge Christmas guy. Now, obviously, I love the fact that Jesus was born and died for our sins. But when we're talking about Santa and the hustle and bustle, and you hear all of these different songs talking about, cozy warm fires and chestnuts roasting. None of that has ever happened. There's no difference, okay, between Thanksgiving Day, a day in which I happen to work 10 hours, and Christmas Day. There's no difference in my schedule. I'm not really invited to a bunch of Christmas parties. This is not me fishing for Christmas invitations. My point is, you always look at it as the good old days. There must have been something different. Something was different in the air. It looked different. Something must have happened because nowadays there's no change in my routine. So I think that kind of realism, except this movie is not realism at all.
Yeah.
In the film sense, it is not realism.
Yes.
But
okay.
however, the events that unfold are incredibly realistic in a way that It's a Wonderful Life or a Miracle on 34th Street, or all these different kind of Christmas classics seem to portray Christmas as being.
Mhm.
So I thought that this movie, kind of to start off, it's so well written.
Mhm.
It's so well written. It is so
Yeah,
it's so funny. And for Peter Billingsley as Ralphie, I mean, he doesn't talk much in the film. Now, obviously,
really.
they've had a sequel
Mhm.
to this, A Christmas Story Christmas, which you can see on Max, formerly known as HBO Max. But in this movie, it's almost entirely voiceover.
Right.
I would say 60% of all the dialogue is voiceover.
Oh, easily. And I think it's really interesting talking about story and jumping into the voiceover narration. So it's narrated by Gene Shepherd, who wrote the novel that was then developed into this movie. Um, so he wrote the novel and then was one of three. Yes, there's three people who get screenwriter credit on this movie. Um, it's Gene Shepherd, uh, Lee Brown, and then Bob Clark, who also directed the movie. Those three get the screen credit for the screenplay. But then it's also Gene Shepherd doing the voiceover as Ralphie, and it's very intimately personal, And I think that's part of the reason this story succeeds so much, because you have really the person who came up with this story at its inception literally being the one telling us this story, right? He's literally the one that's doing Ralphie's internal monologue, or adult Ralphie thinking back, what have you. And that just is like, I found that so fascinating when I read that. Um because it's so it's so auteurist, to use one of your favorite words, auteurism, but it very much is, and it's very uh intentional.
Yes, and honestly, the performance itself
Yeah.
is spectacular. The voiceover itself, not just what is written, but the delivery is just spot on. And you're absolutely right. That is something that when you have um somebody that is intimately involved in the story, if it's an adaptation, that'd be the same thing as having Harry's inner monologue be recorded by J.K. Rowling. It's
Yes.
that kind of intimacy that you understand the character so well that you are able to just become the character in some ways. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, so I can't think of another film like this where, because Gene Shepherd wasn't an actor, if I'm not mistaken.
No, he was
He was an author.
right.
And so to have him come and be the voice and speak 60% of the dialogue,
Mhm.
but like I said, this movie is so funny.
Oh, it's
Some
hilarious.
of that internal monologue, I think that is what is most relatable,
Yeah.
because remove the Christmas element of this, and this happens in every kid's life.
Yeah.
You know,
I want to see, I want to see a family vacation with this type of movie, because I think you end up in these moments where it's, and I think this is a tribute to uh the other actors in the movie who are actually, doing the action on screen. I feel like they're the internal narration is inherently telling the story like through a child's eyes. And yes, that seems obvious
yes,
because like it's Ralphie's movie, but like it's very much like it takes us back to like childlike 9-year-old Ralphie. And the things that happen around him and the events that play out are just so interesting to look at as an adult then, because it's like you're listening to how a child is observing these events, but then you're watching it, and you're watching like the adults, or like how the adults interact with the kids and whatnot. And I don't know if I want to say it's like it's different, or because, let me put it this way: we all remember when we're kids where everything seems so like black and white, and you know before the wool was peeled back from our eyes about the mundaneness of adulthood, right?
Yeah.
um you're very stuck in your own little world as a kid, and you see things through a very certain point of view that has not been informed by years of experiences in the world. So then you're looking at things through a slightly different point of view than an adult would, who's been through, years of experiences, who's grown up, who has to go to work every day, and stuff like that. And so I think this movie kind of does a beautiful job of trying to, or of being able to portray that, because you're getting the child's interpretation, but then the actions aren't always inherently like, oh, this is what a child perceives. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
very much the action plays out as it would, or as close to as a real life situation as possible. And then you're hearing the child's take on it, while you're also, as an adult, giving your own take on it internally in yourself. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
I think to kind of sum up what you're trying to say, it's like circular storytelling,
Yeah.
right? So we have a voiceover of an adult Ralphie that is talking about him being a kid. And the whole purpose of this movie, when it really works, is if you, the audience member, are kind of put in the shoes of Ralphie. But because we are jaded as adults, they do this thing where the inner monologue is of a jaded adult.
Mm-hmm.
And so by approaching it and by addressing some of these elements in the film through an adult perspective, you're then able to think like the kid. It's like this weird way of, and I'm not even explaining it great, but
Yeah,
it's this really weird way of writing where you know your audience, and so you write it for your audience, but at the same time you're able to take that audience and have them, you as an adult. Let's see if I can get this. Okay, because I want to get this, because this is very important.
I'm glad I'm
You
not the
as
only
an
one
adult,
struggling to explain this, because I felt like I
right,
was just,
right.
yeah.
Right. So the goal of this movie is for you as the adult to feel like a kid again.
Mm-hmm.
But you cannot approach it from a kid point of view because adults are jaded.
Yes.
So you have to walk this fine line of the events taking place and the stakes, if you will, of some of these events, uh, told through an adult perspective, so that you're taken back to a time where, if Scut Farkus,
What a name.
that's not a real name, but if it's not real, like that, nobody's ever named their kid Scut. And so Scut Farkus beating you up is a massive deal.
Mm-hmm.
But if we were to watch this on face value, we'd be like, oh, as a kid, that kid is going to grow up and see war or something.
Yeah. Yeah, something
So,
tragic or something like,
right.
a
But
childhood bully is going to seem, like, pennies compared to the real world adult problems that they're going to
right.
grow
So
up and
that's
face.
why this, and I think that's why this movie is so enduring,
Mm-hmm.
is because it is written in such a way where it takes you back to your childhood, but it also is something that is accessible and something you are able to understand as an adult. Because when I watched this movie as a kid, it's not nearly as funny as it is now.
Right.
Like back in the day, I mean, I kind of got some of the stuff, but you didn't understand when you like listen to the inner monologue.
Yeah.
It is so incredible and it is so funny, but you would only be able to get that if you're an adult, because the audience is an adult. So we have this huge
Yeah.
circular, I mean, we've been talking in circles for the past 5 minutes about this, but
And
for
it's,
the folks at home, we want you to identify that the reason why this is so endearing is in part because of the way they're approaching the mind of a kid through the words of an adult.
Yeah. Think of it this way. When you're a kid, and like we said, all your problems, which to adults are small, and you then as an adult looking back realize how small they were. They feel big in the moment. The internal monologue is very dramatic and very, very much leans into like, getting this Red Ryder BB gun, like, is the biggest deal in the world. Like, Ralphie is not going to survive unless he gets this toy. And the dialogue really, or the monologue really sells that, of like how important that is. You understand that when we were kids, we probably approached things the same way. Like we had that toy we had to have, or we had, we wanted or we thought because we dared our friend to stick a tongue on a pole or something stupid like that, like the world was ending and we were in the biggest amount of trouble, or, stuff like that. Things that are so small. The scale is so small in comparison to the things we go through now. But in the time they feel so big. And so I think you as the audience then hearing an adult be so impassioned about a kid's thoughts and feelings makes you realize that like you were that way too.
Yeah, it's scaled. It's scaled up,
yeah.
Right? What we thought was a mountain as a kid is obviously a molehill now as an adult. But the way in which it is written, it is scaled so that from an adult perspective, it's also a mountain.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I mean, this movie is so unique in that it really does capture what it's like to be a child, even more than I would say Home Alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are elements of Home Alone that are kind of similar, where we have a kid of around 10 that is approaching life almost from an adult's perspective. Obviously, this one doesn't have an internal monologue in Home Alone, but so I think those are both unique entries into the pantheon of Christmas films.
Yeah,
because you are approaching it from an adult's perspective but it's events that happen to a kid. So yeah, I think this is just expertly written.
Yeah.
And it's also, you said this was supposed to be in the 40s.
Yeah.
But it's like, this is low-key very Indiana too. Obviously, it's supposed to take place in Indiana. I think it was filmed in maybe Ohio.
It was filmed in Cleveland, and some sequences were shot in Toronto, I believe. But most of it, the house,
yes,
was
the Indy of the North,
which is, ironically, like they live on Cleveland Street.
That is kind of ironic.
I like that. That's a cool detail.
That's a very cool detail.
Yeah, I think someone's turned the house, like some fan bought the house and turned it into like a museum. Basically,
I think it just sold again, if I remember correctly.
It did it? Okay.
Yeah, but this, because of the time period it takes place in, it almost makes me think of like my grandpa.
Yeah.
Right. My grandpa was born in 1940, so he would have been. This would have been kind of his version of the holiday season back in the day.
Right.
But I mean, starting off with some of these characters, the old man is an absolute legend. He is so relatable, right? We think Ralphie's relatable, but we all know an old man.
Oh yeah.
We all know the old man who is kind of just pissy about everything, and then makes big deals out of nothing, and makes nothing out of big deals. We have the whole sequence. It's so famous with the leg lamp.
Fragile. It must be Italian.
Which he goes, it's a major award. And I'm like, for what? You didn't do anything. But he's like, this is an award. Like, everybody needs to see this award. You're like, it's a leg lamp. It means nothing. Why do you say that it's this award? And then he goes, let me look and see what it looks like out from the street. And then like these guys are walking by and they're like, what is that? He said, it's an award. I've won an award. It's like, that's like in SpongeBob where Patrick wins an award for doing absolutely nothing the longest.
Yes.
That's literally what that is.
Yeah.
And And then I just am also reminded, because he's a little bit like my uncle, who has lived in Indiana many years. He was born up in northern Indiana. He moved around for some for some work stuff, and then has been back for many years. And it just, like, kind of the small town hometown feel of this, but also the dog thing is so relatable, that the dogs just like go after him,
Yeah.
and then he's always got to fix something's always broken, so you always got
Yeah.
to fix it. And then he's just gold.
Oh yeah. I mean, I definitely see parts of my dad and both my grandfathers in this. When Randy's crying at the dinner table, uh, and he says, "I'll give you something to cry about." That was a famous. My grandpa. That was one of his famous lines. Um, but yeah, it's just
Not
it's
Father
very
Larry.
no. My other grandpa.
Yeah, I would say if Father Larry is like, "I'll give you something to cry about," I'd be like, step down from the pulpit, my guy. No.
He did. He did finally retire. Then he this like a few months ago. He did finally retire. Shout out, Grandpa, if you're watching
Yeah.
this. Um,
Once a father, always a father. Father Larry.
hey, I'm sure he didn't turn in his priest collar. So
No. Um, but yeah, so you have this character, and what from what you told me, this character wasn't
yeah,
originally, it was offered to somebody else.
yeah. So it's played by Darren McGavin, but when they were casting this, uh, the screenplay got shown to Jack Nicholson, and apparently Nicholson was interested. Um, but when when it came time to negotiating for price, they realized to hire Nicholson, they would have had to double the budget. Not just double like the salary of for this one part, double the entire budget just to pay Jack Nicholson.
Yeah. And
So
so that
obviously
obviously,
they said, no.
right. But at the same, man, that would have been an interesting film. I
Well, you see here, Ralphie.
That was just a twinge of Jack Nicholson. I got a little bit of that in it.
Essence de Nicholson.
But I also, the character is really interesting, but honestly, the performance is kind of forgettable in my opinion. And that may be a hot take. So it'd be really interesting to think about Jack Nicholson as an all-time great American actor
Yeah.
playing this character, because I feel like the main star of this movie is clearly Ralphie.
Oh,
Right.
100%.
We most of the dialogue is Ralphie. The story revolves around Ralphie. I feel like it would have been different if Jack Nicholson was the old man.
I think
That it almost,
it would have been distracting, honestly.
yeah,
I
it would
think
have been distracting. There would have been more of him, I think, than it just being like a solo Ralph adventure.
I mean, if you think about this movie, there's no, I mean, Peter Billingsley is a name now, but like really, there's no like,
There's no name talent in this.
no, um, and so it's a very like kind of, uh, it it's a movie that I feel like it lets the characters speak instead of the actors per se. Like sometimes you go see a movie and you have your favorite actors that you go see them, and you're consciously always aware that you know um it's Joaquin Phoenix or it's Russell Crowe or it's Hugh Jackman or insert whatever name here, like big names like that. You're always kind of aware that it's them portraying these characters, but I mean, I don't recognize these people from anywhere, to be honest.
And like I said, the character is memorable, the performance is not.
Right.
And that's essentially what I'm getting at. If it was Jack Nicholson, it would have been very, very obvious that Jack Nicholson is playing his dad. And I don't think that would have fit. But or if somebody else were to have played the mother, But yeah, you're right. When we have these kind of unknown actors, they're able to hide behind the characters in a way that a named talent would not be able to do. So that allows for these characters to shine. I mean, the other one is Randy.
What a little turd.
What a piece of work.
It's
I
funny
mean,
though,
what?
listening to this. So my dad is the oldest, and listening to him when tell stories when we would watch this movie together, there are moments that he is like, "Oh, your Uncle Donnie used to be just like Randy, or he used to do the same thing." That I remember him talking when they were kids, or telling a story about when they were kids that Uncle Donnie had like a snowsuit, much like Randy's. I can't put my arms down.
Yeah, bro is literally the Michelin Man.
But it's
He's
just,
walking around like the Stay Puft
yeah,
Marshmallow Man. I mean, he just be, because there are kids like that are so annoying,
yeah.
so annoying. I mean, and some of the lines about him, like he would not willingly eat food. He kind of had to be tricked into eating food. And then there's the one scene where he's under the sink and he's just chilling, and she's like trying to get him out, and and he goes no, and she goes, "You want some milk?" He's like, "Yeah," and then she goes, she goes, "See you later," and then shuts the door. It's like, uh,
Sometimes I don't know this because I'm not a parent, but I feel like there's sometimes you just got to pick and choose your battles.
that is correct. That is very much correct. But he just personifies the kid brother.
Oh yes, very much
Going up
so.
there and then just like crying hysterically when meeting Santa Claus. Because if you're the oldest, this is yet another way that adults can kind of be put in, put on these lenses of being a kid. Is if you are the oldest, you remember when your younger siblings would go and like cry and scream
Mhm.
with Santa. There's a picture. I'm not going to be able to find it, but there's a picture of Anne Marie. She had to have been 5, something like 5. And there's a Christmas picture of her meeting Santa, and her hands are out like this, and she is screaming. She is screaming. She hates it. And then Rhea and I are just like, happy to see this sweaty old man, but Amory is just
Ho ho ho.
yeah. Amory has just lost it.
Yeah.
And so that picture is ingrained in my memory, even though I actually, for those of you who have watched the pod, or know me, know that I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but I remember things like that.
Yeah.
Her just screaming and them talking about it for years and years. So you have these characters that are almost like caricatures in a way
Mhm.
of what it's like planes, trains, and automobiles,
Yeah,
right? We
I
talked
got I got a similar vibe in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
because we talked about these kind of hollow characters, if you will, that you're able to kind of put the suit on and become them. It's very, very similar, except these are more sophisticated characters.
Mhm.
But the events around these characters are so ubiquitous.
Yeah. And
Uh,
I think uh, and I think playing into this, especially since this is a Christmas movie, because I think Christmas, at least if in only memory, brings out the child in all of us. You remember Christmas morning getting up and opening presents, and seeing what Santa Claus left you under the tree, and going and spending time with family and whatnot. I mean, like everyone, even if you're not a fan of Christmas, I feel like has memories of enjoying Christmas as a child. And I think the fact that this movie is told from that child's perspective, and it's about Christmas, just doubles down on that, bringing you back to your childhood memories. And even though this is set in the 40s, I wrote this down. Times change, but people, especially kids, are still the same generally. And
100%.
I think there is a lot of relatability, whether you grew up in the 40s, you grew up in the 70s, you grew up in the 90s, in early 2000s. I think there's just this ubiquitous quality to people and humanity that we go through a lot of very shared and similar experiences. And I think this movie, where it really, really succeeds, is pulling you back to those childhood memories, especially at Christmas time, when you already are reminiscing about being a kid. And it just, it gets you. It connects with you on such that core whatever level way. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's just, there's such a strong connection there that even though, you know, I didn't grow up in 1940s fictionalized Indiana, this reminds me of my childhood in a lot of ways. And I think there's a lot of people that can testify to that I would agree with that. And I think that's just is why this movie has endured.
Now is the time we're going to jump into Rosebud and Thorn for this Christmas Classics series. Jake, passing it off to you as I do every week. What are your Rosebud and Thorn for A Christmas Story?
So I think the biggest rose has to go to the story and the screenplay by Gene Shepard, Lee Brown, and Bob Clark. And then obviously, like we talked about, Gene Shepard created the original story, had the original idea for this. I think this is just all the layers to this story and how it interacts with the audience, like we've been talking about. I think that's just really where this movie succeeds and why it endures and is so beloved by all and is a classic to this day. I'm also going to give a rose to Gene Shepard as adult Ralphie's internal monologue, however you want to describe it. That voiceover work, it is perfect. That this movie does not succeed at all without that.
I 100% agree.
Also going to give a rose to Peter Billingsley and yeah, I'm going to say Darren McGavin and then Melinda Dillon. Darren McGavin plays the father and Melinda Dillon plays the mother. You said the performances aren't memorable when we were talking about the father. I get that, but I feel like they play this very well for the story. And I understand what you're saying about you lose the actor in the performance and it feels very real to the story. And I think that's part of the reason it's successful. I find the mom really annoying in this movie, not gonna lie. And which I think kids find their parents at times very annoying too. So I think that even makes it all the more relatable. But they're funny. They give us, as adults, they really kind of give us something to latch onto and to see and to appreciate from an adult's standpoint. And how they interact with Ralphie and the other kids. But yeah, so I'm going to give roses to those performers as well. But so there's this, I've always noticed it when I watch this movie, and it always bugs me. The focus is kind of soft, or there's this just like soft glow to things, and maybe it's intentional and to try and this like nostalgic vibe of like soft and luscious, thinking back in your memories, but it's just annoying. It's visually kind of gross, in a time when we're so used to to such crisp images. Like, I don't know, maybe it's even just an issue in the resolution, maybe in the original print, maybe it's not that, and resolution scaling and whatnot has warped the image when it goes to streaming or when it's played on TV. But it really bugs me because it feels like a mistake, kind of. And like I said, maybe you can make an argument story wise, but yeah, it really bugged me. And one thing I noticed on this rewatch, and maybe it's because I'm thinking about this movie in the context of this podcast, right? Thinking about this critically in a way that like, okay, I want to talk about this and I want to break down this film. I feel like the ending is a little disappointing from a story perspective.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like he gets the gun. In a way, it kind of, the warning kind of comes true, and that's kind of ironic. But then the turkey gets stolen and we go have Chinese. Like there's nothing, like it just kind of leaves me on a kind of note. You know what I mean? And so it's like in terms of like story arcs or like structure, I felt like the conclusion was a little for me. And then the only I wrote down the mall elves, their costume. Like
Those are cursed.
the hats, like
Those are cursed.
they look like if you took the toe of like a genie slipper or whatever. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
it looks
talking
like they
about?
lived in Fibro.
Yes. They're so ugly and weird looking.
Yeah,
And maybe
it's
that's to enhance the like, when you see adult characters, whether that be mall Santas or um characters in like a parade or like in an amusement park, they can be kind of scary or like off-putting to kids in a way. I know I refused as a child to sit on many a Santa's lap because I was afraid.
yeah. How wild is that? How
Yeah,
wild is that one time a year, we as adults decide that our kids can sit on a stranger's lap
it is a
and
little
ask him
weird.
for things.
It is a little weird.
Yeah, and it's even weirder that it's like in a line. Like, okay, now's the time of year where you get to sit on this stranger's lap, and it's always wild that all the kids are always not okay with it, which is
maybe
kind of funny.
maybe they're onto something.
Yeah, maybe they are onto something. Why,
May,
why can't
it,
why
it
can't we just be like, hey Santa, I'm just
it's
gonna
this
have a conversation.
it's this internalized thing of, you've told me not to interact with strangers or like sit on strangers' laps my whole life, and now you just take me to this fat old guy in a red suit and say, no, you sit on his lap. It's like, I don't even know him.
Yeah, it's like why? Just why?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a whole thing. For me, my roses gotta go to the screenplay. It's so funny. It's such a mood. It's like it's such a vibe, as the kids would say. Like it is so funny, and it's so relatable, and just the mountains that are made out of molehills. I know I keep using that phrase, but it's just expertly done. And the other rose I gotta give uh to adult Ralphie. He just imbues this sense of urgency to everything that happens, and I think it's spectacular. Uh, buds, I have a few buds on this. As much as I love this movie, there are things. One is the focus. It takes me out of it too, and that I maybe more than other films can buy as an artistic choice. There's a lot of artistic license that is used here.
Mhm.
Whether it is it's the focus, the lens focus, or the fact that you have these kind of like dream sequences or daydream sequences that completely take you out of the film. It's it's a choice, not one that I necessarily liked. I like a little bit more. Those are all like non-diegetic in a way,
Yeah.
right? I like a film to be more diegetic,
Mhm.
but that is something that really kind of annoyed me because it takes me out of the film, right? It's one thing to speed up the edit when the kids are running, which seems like that's what they did.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that. There's definitely that auteurism
Mhm.
there, or the idea that the director is kind of winking at the audience. It happens a lot, and that's something that I guess I don't feel like we needed
Mhm.
necessarily for this movie to succeed. So those kinds of things are that's like my biggest bud is the kind of artistic choices that were made, I don't think they just did not appeal to me. The score and the soundtrack also kind of bothered me a little bit. I
Yeah.
can't
Yeah, I
I
get that
can't
too.
put a finger on why necessarily. It just did.
Hmm.
As for Thorns, as much as this is like a movie, like almost like a slice of life in a way, but like a satirical play on a slice of life, the story was just really weak. We had our main premise, but none of the other characters seemed to get any sort of story.
Hmm.
Which again, maybe that's an artistic choice, right? In the mind of a kid, the what's going on with other people, that empathy that just doesn't matter to you. And so maybe that is another artistic choice. But again, it just really bothered me that what is the purpose of me watching this? Is the purpose of me watching this to just get the feel for Christmas past in a way, or the for me to just reminisce on being a kid? Okay, but still, there's no story. There's not much story. There's no character depth, and that's the same thing I kind of had an issue with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. But again, it works, but that doesn't mean I have to like it, or maybe I wanted something different from it. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say is kind of my thorn, is just kind of this lack of story. You're basically basing the whole thing off of I want a red rifle for Christmas, BB gun, but
Hmm.
also what else is going on?
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Now we are going to discuss who we think we are. And I texted you when I was watching this who I thought I was, because I think it's pretty freaking obvious. So maybe you get a little bit of a cheat this week, but I'm curious as to who you think I am, because it is so freaking plainly obvious to me
Wait a minute.
who I am
I
in
don't
this movie.
remember you sending this to me.
Well,
Oh,
you were asleep when I texted you.
yes. Yes, I agree. You are Ralphie.
Yeah. Oh, a
A
billion.
hundred
I was like,
percent.
I relate to him way too much.
Yeah. And I did write that down yesterday before you texted me.
Okay.
So this is authentic. It's hard to like pinpoint it though. Like I guess maybe you look a little like him, maybe. I mean, like, yes, I'm comparing a 9-year-old to a 25-year-old. Um, you're both uh you're both older brothers. So I definitely like saw that. Um, I think okay, the whole thing with the BB gun. Ralphie tries to be very strategic in very persuasive. Um, and he turns the school project into what he thinks is this literary work of art about why he should have this BB gun. And I feel like you would have done that as a kid. Like
100%. And now as an adult, it really is a literary work of art, and it's 100 pages and it's on Star Wars. It's my
it's a
thesis.
thesis.
It's a monograph.
He
It's
wanted he wanted a Star Wars Lego set when he was 9, and now he wrote a thesis.
yes. No, the the reason why I'm Ralphie is because Ralphie is a classic case of overthinking.
That too.
That's why. That inner monologue that you hear, I have it too. And it's not voiced by a guy named Gene, but it is. I have an inner monologue too, where I am constantly extrapolating things from other things. Right. I'm traveling down these different paths of what would happen. Well, what would happen if I do this, or as opposed to do that? And it's kind of like daydreaming, but it's different. It's analysis. And so Ralphie
Day
is a
planning.
classic, yeah, and planning. So Ralphie's a classic case of over analysis. And so I think that's why I relate to him so much. Um, Yours was a little difficult because you're ornery like Randy. Um, but I have to say you're the old man. And the reason why you're the old man is you're a bit crotchety.
I can be.
Yes, you can be. And that's not just when you're singing Civil War songs. But
When I do that, I'm intoxicated.
Yes, but for the folks that don't know Jake, Jake has a heart of gold, but also he's a realist and can kind of, especially, and it's a perfect dynamic with me being Ralphie too, because I will explain to you these complex theories of why this girl isn't talking to me. And you kind of just like cut down the freaking bush. And I'm like, hey, like this is why. Right. And it, kind of with the old man, he kind of does that too, where Ralphie is in his mind explaining all these things about the old man. And he's just kind of blunt when it comes to things. But I feel you just give off the vibe of like if you were to have a son, basically me, if I were your son and we were on the side of the road and I was trying to help you change a tire and I flipped up all the other things. One, I would think it's the end of the world. And two, you'd be so pissed. You'd be like, just get back in the car. Okay. Well, let me just handle it. So that's why you're clearly the old man, even though you have that bit of ornery of Randy, which, gosh, as I told you, I was like, if my kid ever acts like that, I'm my biggest fear, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's kind of funny. My biggest fear as an adult, especially as a dad, is having a kid that does things like that. And it's not like kind of a push you outside of your comfort zone, but I'm very measured in what I do and the reason why I do it. And I'm very logical in a lot of things. Also, I'm very illogical in a lot of things too.
Yes.
But the reason I make the decisions I make are based on fact or experience. And I'm afraid that my kid's not going to be that. And so I'm not going to be able to explain the world to him because, or her, because they're not going to be able to think in the same way as I am. That is my biggest fear. It's not being a dad, because I think I'll probably be a pretty great dad. I already got the puns down. But it's my brain works a certain way. And if your brain is also not working that way, we're going to have this barrier to communication that is terrifying. So end of rant
So
on that subject.
You mean you don't want a kid who only eats his dinner by acting like he's a pig?
Yeah, that is not a game of chess I want to play.
And also, they have meatloaf, red cabbage, and mashed potatoes for every meal.
Meatloaf's bussin'. I love meatloaf. Meatloaf, I used to for my birthday, I would always have meatloaf as the meal. And my grandma has a great meatloaf recipe, and so I make that more times than any 25-year-old probably should. You know, like how many 25-year-olds do you know they're like, oh, I'm having meatloaf for dinner. And it used to be meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and cream corn. You put the cream corn on the mashed potatoes, you kind of make a divot, you put the cream corn in there, and then you have the ketchup that you spread on top, right, when you're kind of baking to finish off the meatloaf, and then you put ketchup in there, and then oh yeah, it's
so there's a science to this. It's thought out.
That's it's something. It's not science, but it's something.
I've never seen a meal with so much geometry.
It better not be geometry. I hate geometry. Math sucks.
Math sucks.
I was in a class, and then we'll get back on track. I was in a class in high school, a math class with Rhea. Rhea was 2 years advanced math. I chose to only be 1 year advanced math. And I say I chose because I'm not going to make it sound like Rhea is smarter than me because I'm her older brother. But we had this teacher named Mr. Robertson, and he bullied me. He low-key bullied me. Like, Rhea and I have talked about this. Rhea remembers, Rhea said, She goes, he bullied you. Like he bullied you like every day. And I was kind of a smartass, but his version was just incessantly bullying me. So my bullies in school weren't kids; they were the teachers.
Your bully wasn't named Scut Farkus; it was named Mr. Rabbits.
Scut Farkus is not a name. How do you? That's one of those things where it's like the writers and directors have to be winking at the audience, because that's not a name of a human. Scut, SCUT. Trust me, I watch it with the subtitles. It's SCUT. Scut Farkus. What's Scut short for? Razor cut? Hi, my name is Razor Cut Scut Farkus. You know.
My name's Razor Cut, but you can call me Scut.
They named me that because my dad was shaving when my mom was giving birth. And he goes, ow, razor cut. And then they wrote it down, you know? Yeah. So yeah, maybe. Oh, also, final thing, and then we're gonna get to closing thoughts. Story time with Ben. I licked a pole when I was a kid. A frozen pole. I licked a frozen pole because of this movie. Because I was like, there's no way that's real. So I decided, before the bus came one morning, we had a metal light lamppost. And so I got out a little early and I thought I stuck my tongue to the lamppost. And then I heard the bus, so I was like, oh, okay. And it would move. And I was like, well, hot damn. I'm stuck. What do I do? And so I kind of like licked it a little bit more, and to try and like maybe wet my whistle a little bit to pop it off, and it got stuck even more. And so I had Rhea. I was like, Rhea, go get me some hot water. I thought, well, hot water. And she went and she got some hot water, and she also got Mom, which I don't know. I clearly, as the tactician that I am, knew that hot water may burn my tongue, but it would create it would prevent me from being stuck on there anymore. And so instead of pouring the hot water on it, Mom just ripped my tongue off the bowl. So yeah, and then I went to school.
Why do I just want to hear your bus driver's side of the story, who was just sitting there watching this whole thing?
The bus driver's like, who's this idiot? Like, there goes Ben licking stuff again. You know, like I wasn't a kid that licked doorknobs. You know, I didn't lick an escalator. You know, I licked a middle pole when it was frozen, because I thought, you know, the physics in this movie don't add up, but they do. So anyway, that was story time with Ben. I just keep riffing because I see Jake's really close to crying with laughter. Which he is prone to do.
You're giving me something to cry about in the
good way. And trust me, I cried when she ripped that off. And I don't mean just like pull off. She ripped that sucker off. She said yeet, and I was like, oh my god. I was like, I'm bleeding. She goes, here's a napkin. Have fun at school. Like, no hydrogen peroxide, no, you know, give me alcohol. Right? Isn't this what Jim Beam is for? But anyway, so we're gonna move into some final thoughts. We're gonna move into some final thoughts is where we're at. Jake, I'm gonna throw it off to you as I do every single week. What are your final thoughts on A Christmas Story?
Final thoughts. I've always liked this one. I liked it even on this rewatch. Yeah, there's some holes, there's some weak points in the story, but I think there's just one, it's really smart in the way it like plays off the audience and like really brings you into the story, and brings your memories into the story. So I really enjoyed that part of it. It's funny, it's fun, it brings back childhood memories of Christmas, even if you didn't experience Christmas in the 40s. So I think that's really cool. And yeah, I'm excited that we're doing Christmas movies. I love Christmas movies. I love Christmas. I am a Christmas fanatic, so this is one of my favorite times of year, and yeah, I'm excited for the rest of the series.
Yeah, for me, this was a staple in my house. This is Dad's favorite. I find it so much funnier now as an adult. So if this is something that you watched as a kid and haven't kind of revisited because you're like, yeah, it was okay, it's so much better as an adult. But I think it's really smart. It's quite funny. You're absolutely right. This is not a perfect movie by any stretch, but what I think it succeeds in and does quite well is put you as an adult in the mind of a kid once more. So that is what I would say about A Christmas Story. But the question is for you folks. Have you seen A Christmas Story? Is this on your Christmas watch list? Not wish list, watch list. Or is this something that you'd never heard of? Let us know your thoughts, Rosebud and Thorn, whatever you want to say. We'd love to hear it in the comments down below. If you like this video, hit that like button and ring that bell with the subscribe button to get notifications on all upcoming content. We still got a few more Christmas classics to show you before the end of the year. Make sure to follow us on social media. Follow myself, Jake, and the Cinefile. You see the links. They're right up there like they are every week. For Jake Biller, I'm Ben Sparrow. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next week. And cut.